I was a bit in doubt what kind of audience it would be, but I can hear from the questions a lot of people who are interested in biology. So I will hopefully tell you about something new that you haven't heard about before, some of you at least. As my colleague said, yes, I'm a social scientist, and I think this picture captures very well what a social scientist, what we are doing in the Arctic. This is a picture from the Lill Rastad ice fjord, and you can see it out here. It's called Glaciers, and in front of the ice fjord we have an area here, an old Inuit site, and it's called Samamiut, and we also, this area is also a UNESCO site, and as you can see here, there are people taking a dip in the lake just beside. So it's culture, society, politics, community, all of these things that we are interested in. And of course, for this particular project, we are looking at some of the changes in Greenland from a community perspective. Of course, I'm doing research where you will be able to find local people. So in Greenland, it's mostly on the west coast where most people live, and we are doing for this project research in Nuuk and in the Nuuk Kangerlussuaq, and of course also in the Disco Bay, especially in Ilulissat and Grottassuaq, the big island. You can see just beside Ilulissat. Climate change in Greenland. I will try to roll out an argument about climate research for the Greenlandic society. Because, as a recent studies show, in Greenland they experience the effect of climate change themselves. And of course we find that interesting also to include in FACET and in research as such, and also in the IPCC report we hear about the impact of climate change in the polar region, and these reports are always interesting to visit, and especially for the last one here, there was a special section on the polar region where you can dig in and learn more. So, to do climate change research for and with the Greenland society, it's important because the social drivers are often more important than climate drivers when it comes to politics and decision making. We can see that from research, and science. Social scientists would argue, and the professor Lill Rastad, she's arguing that cannot be separated from the influence of socio-political world. So assigning priority status to the affected community in the Arctic is also a way of avoiding and perpetuating the colonial project. A place like Greenland used to be a Danish colony. It was colonized 300 years ago, but today it's a self-governing country. It's still part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but Greenland has its own parliament and government, but they have two representatives in the Danish parliament as well. Doing research in Greenland, it's important to be aware of some of these things, and to include community and community priorities and values and decisions is important also in that regard. Also, what we see today and what we saw in the latest ARCA report is Arctic Council. They do big assessments as well. Was that regional governments in the Arctic are increasingly becoming key players for the domestic development and also for climate policies. So what I would argue here is what is needed at the moment, and why we do face it, is climate change research has to be more specific to Greenland and relevant for the Greenlandic society. all in all, I think it's important to look closely to the societal and cultural implication of these global climate changing and the changes that it's bringing. As a professor from FACEIT said in a paper, she's sitting over here, Grete Hovedskov, she said that climate change research result does not necessarily translate into adaptive behavior, and of course that's a problem. But the social and knowing about the social, which social scientists are interested in, can be the catalyst for change. Cultural discourses can both move, but it can also hinder human practices. And of course, what we see with the misinformation and fake news and all of that is a big problem, and I could say a cultural discourse that we need to confront. This is from a month ago, from the climate march in Copenhagen, where I attended with my family. And a lot of other people as well, as you can see. But to do that, to do climate science that matters to the Greenlandic society can be a challenge. Because some of the research design that we think is good for science does not necessarily align with Greenland being a capitalist, industrial, and modern society. I mean, you heard some wonderful talks just before me about all the changes happening in the fjord system, and you think, well, just stop doing this or that, or can you change your way of life? But Greenland, all in all, want to see more development, want to see more growth. So how can we do both? And climate change discussions in Greenland, like all over the world, are also framed by political discourses and opinions and values. And you can find people in Greenland that see themselves, or I would say, well, climate deniers. There were even a minister for climate in Greenland at some point who were not, who didn't believe in climate change. So he's not minister anymore, but that was an interesting observation. And the complexity in the Arctic. So when we zoom out and come out with these grand, things, we must understand that it's very complex, the changes that we see in the Arctic, and big diversity. And when we talk about the local community, and again my colleague here, Grete, she said it, community are not homogeneous entities. So when we want to study things from a local perspective, there's not only one voice or a position. People have very different experiences and access to knowledge about what is going on in the fjord systems. Some people, they have used all their lives, fishing and hunting and know the land that way, and other people have a desk job and read papers and do other stuff. So we have very different access to that knowledge. Social and cultural values are also embedded in the subsistent economy in Greenland. And there are many, this is a picture from the local newspaper, Smitjak, and where you can see that a local town called Flords in the north of Greenland, they would like to have their own quotes for narwhals. And these kinds of, because it's a very important food source and resource for the town, among other things. And some of these cultural and social values might still be less dominant in the hard science data, even though they are prevalent in the societal discussions and central to decision making in the end. We are focusing in this project very much on, for my work package 4, we were looking into fishing activities, and fishing is a very big thing in Greenland because it's one of the things that Greenland lives from in terms of export. So that's a very big part of the economy. Yeah, I think I will maybe go a bit fast over this, but Greenland is unique in a way that Greenland's business life is dominated by very large public-owned enterprises, and what is kind of the bigger challenge for the Greenlandic government is to have a more diversified economy with more private actors as well. This is from Lill Rastad, where I also went. Yeah. A lot of the pictures are from my fieldwork. Of course, tourism is also a way that Greenland look for a way to diversify its economy. There are 2 new airports being built in Greenland, one in Nuuk and one in Ilulissat, and there is expectation, at least in Greenland, that will bring more tourists. At the moment, this is a hotel guest, and which kind of nationalities you can see. There's still a long way to see that, you know, talk about mass tourism, but it's progressing, and especially here after the pandemic. We have been discussing a lot about adaptation, and adaptation. That is actually what humanity has failed to do the last 100 years. So I think what people do in their everyday life, when we kind of zoom in on the local community, is more about coping. You know, how can I have a nice life? How can I take advantage of the situation I'm in? I might not be able to do anything about the melting of the ice cap, but I might do a lot of other things in my life. And also, the philosopher Zizek, he says that there is a kind of, we said that, you know, don't do it, and then after that we told everyone how to do it. There is a schisma there where, at least just in my lifetime, I've seen that there are so many times where we could have changed things, we could have regulated, you know, people flying, domestic flying. Why is that even illegal in a country like Denmark? That's just, again, my opinion. But this is also part of the problem. But also, looking back at my previous research, I can see that in the climate change debate, like 20 years ago, the Arctic was used as a messenger to communicate climate change, and also, but in a way that was not always productive in terms of advocating for change. And this talking about global warming as an Arctic saga, and something that happened remotely, was not always doing the job. But of course, we are not in a situation now where we have the big discussion of whether or not climate change is real, but it's not without its problems. When it comes to Greenland, and to what we can say about what happens within the local communities. We have a lot of data, but they're not necessarily specific to the towns where we do our work. So therefore, of course, local people, their experience is very important and key to our work. And this is actually a quote from a colleague from the Danish Meteorological Institute, and he says that probably it's not the technical side of things. The challenge is to engage with the local community and balance that with what is scientifically feasible and possible, and looking for what are their needs. Because the discussion locally about adaptation is also very close to the whole discussion about local values, local needs. In Denmark, we have a climate atlas. I think you might have something like that here in Germany as well. But we don't have that for Greenland, so it can be quite hard to zoom in on specific towns. It's more like 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, and then what? But it means a lot to local people if you have like an important fish factory that you live from, or other things that could be affected by climate change. Well, I did this study. I know the title is a bit provoking, but at the moment, even though we have tons of assessment about changes going on in the Arctic, Greenland still doesn't have a climate policy. It's not part of it has been part of the Kyoto Protocol. It left the Kyoto Protocol. It has not been part of the Copenhagen Accord, the Rio Convention, and it's not part of the Paris Agreement. There are several reasons for that, and maybe I need to hurry up. There are a new government in Greenland, and they have been pursuing kind of a new green agenda. And the first thing they said, oh, we want to join the Paris Agreement. But then they went into a new coalition with the party Siumut, and they said, no. We should first know what would be the consequence of joining the Paris Agreement, and all of these things, and economic effects. Because Greenland has not been part of the Paris Agreement because they're afraid that if they go, that's what I see from the correspondence and the way they approach it in political speeches, is that they think it could be bad for progress. Because if Greenland get a new industry, a big mine, a mega project, it could double the CO2 emissions from Greenland from one year to the next, basically. So they're very reluctant or in terms of joining, but also because they are a state information, so they are not part of the UN as an independent country. They are part of the Kingdom of Denmark, so they are not negotiating on their own terms. So I suspect that in time it will happen. They have also decided to stop all oil and gas exploration to kind of meet this new green agenda. It's actually also because it has not their oil and gas strategy has not been that successful in terms of finding something that was a good business case, or finding oil and gas in Greenland that was feasible to develop. They're about to implement. They're implementing a 10-year biodiversity strategy, and it's also interesting how that will affect the discussion. There are plans for new hydropower plants. Greenland pursue green transition also because they have loads of possibilities to produce renewable energy, basically because the Greenland ice cap is melting. So the possibility to develop more hydropower from that is there, both for domestic use, but also maybe for private initiatives. So what they dream about is to, or the government at least, is to export, also export some of these renewable energy, and maybe cooperate with national investors who need this large amount of cheap energy to develop power to X and these things. So this is what the current government, they are looking for, and so there's been like a paradigm shift from not wanting to commit to any of the global deals to all of a sudden looking towards green transition. And I published a small paper about that, so please read that if you want to know more about it. Yeah, so to finish up, this was kind of my possibilities to tell you something new, hopefully, that we need a climate science that matters, and also to look into the coping mechanism and knowledge transfer from Arctic citizens and newcomers kind of need to be a core element for Arctic climate research, and we hope to do that with this not new, but we are in the middle of it, with this project, so we can support the navigating of the Arctic from the inside and not from the outside, also when it comes to climate change and climate policy and all of that. Well, that was everything for me, and this is me and my colleague this summer.
I think we have time for a couple of questions. First one,
yeah. A question and a comment, thanks. You showed the narwhal and you mentioned the question is about the narwhal quota. You said that that was not co-developed, or it wasn't a co-management. And then the comment was about, actually to you and to Greta, about the lack of homogeneity in the communities. The communities are very unhomogeneous. And when I came to Finland in 1994, I started following the media and the white papers, and then hear about the Sami community needs this or wants this. And you find out it goes down to households may not even agree. But I was wondering about that quota. How is that set?
Maybe I should give the word to Thomas. What I wanted to say with that picture was that it was an individual town who would like their own quota.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a little, if you read the text, it was in Danish, but a little more complex than that. But so maybe Thomas, you're the right person to answer that.
Yeah, well, just like most other countries, the way that quotas are established in Greenland is that we do it for species, each species, and for certain regions. So the government gets scientific input from our institute, and then they get input from the Fishers and Hunters Association, and from international organizations and other stakeholders as well. And then they take all this advice together, and based on that, they establish the quota for an individual region. And that also goes for the narwhals. And just to follow up on the narwhals, because it's been a hot topic in recent years, very hot topic, because the statement was that the narwhals was disappearing in southeast Greenland, is that we actually went in and got additional funding to go out and do a new study where we actually invited the hunters on board that disagree with our first findings. And we went out, and you will probably be able to read that in the coming years, but I can tell you that it didn't look much different from our first studies. So, yeah. Any more questions? Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah, I recently saw a documentary about Greenland and the climate change, and they said they saw it as opportunity for the farmers or for agriculture that they can start farming and be less dependent on imports. And is there something similar with maybe fishing, or is the effect of climate change on the fishing industry just negative? And I could assume when there's more Atlantification, so when the cod, the Atlantic cod goes more to the north, maybe they have more fish there, and they see it as opportunity or to cope with it.
Of course, it's complex. I mean, there are new all of a sudden coming new possibilities for cod, but if they're not, I'm not a fisheries management, but it's also about the price of the fish and all of that. And if you have a lot of a new species, but that is you get less paid for it, then it might be a wonderful experience, but in the end, the bank account might not be happy. So it's that's a thing, and the whole discussion about benefits, it's a bit, I think I can see from research, and when we talk to people, they want to see the possibilities in their own lives. So for some people, the lack of ice in the Ilulissat ice fjord can be very nice, because then you can just take your boat any day and go out and fish. But then we went to Ladasvak, and the hunters, they told us, well, the weather is so extreme, like there are more extreme weather events, so I might be able to go anywhere any day I like, but I might just lie there for a week or two because the weather is so crazy that I cannot do my work. So it's complex in that sense, but and also with the farming, you know, some summers are really hot and others are cold. I mean, I think what I've learned from climate scientists is the problem is the extreme weather, and you cannot really adapt to that, and you cannot really, you know, plan for that. They're nodding. I'm not totally stupid. Yeah.
Maybe they try to see the best in it, but yeah, might be an opportunity for them or a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
But yeah.
For somebody who's really flexible and can see possibilities and who can raise money fast to handle, you know, the different situation, well, it can be, you know, a good thing. But others might not be in that situation. Yeah, I think that's the closest I can get to answer that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lill.